So just a little bit of background. I practiced pathology for about 12 years or something like that, and I always sort of have had those sort of three kind of concurrent, careers. One of them is a clinical medicine, another is administrative, and the third one is research. I started a company called MedPath in Nashville with a guy named Hugo Prybor that we actually merged and sold that company, and it's a LabCorp today. So we were the people who put the first hub and spoke lab together in the country. We actually put a lab between the two runways in Atlanta, rented a hangar from Delta Airlines and put a clinical lab in there. And then we did the same thing next to the FedEx runways in Memphis, and then did Columbus, Ohio as well. A number of different companies that I started up. I ran and started a company that would buy, build, start, and then sell back to university hospitals, other specialty hospitals like cardiology and orthopedics. But now I'm the chief medical officer for an insurance company, which is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. That works in the upper northwest corner of the United States, called Pacific Source. Jim, you asked about the breakfast club. It literally started out as a breakfast meeting amongst some local people here in Boise. We have a guy who's former chief quality and safety officer for MD Anderson, a pediatrician who was on who led the American Board of Pediatrics, a family practice doc who runs the most successful FMRI, the federally qualified healthcare center in the state of Idaho, and a former American Academy of Family Physicians president. We have another really talented young physician administrator who runs a critical access hospital in Emmett, Idaho, about 35 or 40 miles away from the edges of Boise and Gemini. And it's really, I would encourage you to think about this, because we kind of get together and it's just a bunch of old guys talking about things in a very confidential and safe way. And it's probably the best meeting I attend every month. And the agenda usually starts off with just checking in, seeing how people are doing. We have a topic we work through, and it's usually somebody in the group presents a topic or a question. Once in a while we'll have a guest, and then we just sort of talk. And it's been a great place to have a really safe environment for people who are in the same sort of stage in career in life we are, and it's turned into some really good friendships. So I don't know, Jim, you may have some other thoughts about that.
Well, just that I'm so amazed that these busy executives block this out of their calendar, and we get 100% attendance. We didn't before, we didn't earlier, but it's turned out that they're saying this is the most important hour and a half of my week. My assistants know not to mess with it. So I think that's how these things are evolving. And certainly a lot of pressure on me to make this worth busy people's time, but it's kind of working. So anyway, thank you, Edward. And we'll probably come up with some questions. Knowing you, I think you like to have more of a discussion than a presentation, but this topic led to some great conversations we had when Edward tested it on us breakfast club Medvillistas.
Well, let me launch into this. So this is a story kind of that has emerged over some years. And like Jim, this guy I'm going to talk about is a fellow named Duncan Newhouser. Duncan was a professor of mine at the Case Western Reserve University, where I went to medical school in Cleveland, sunny Cleveland, because 300 days of cloud cover a year, exactly opposite of Boise. And he was a guy that I met when I went into medical school. And one summer, there was a break between first and second years. And so I read this is going to probably give you more information than you need to about me. I read a textbook on epidemiology and statistics that he had written. And that fall, as a second year medical student, I walked into his office, and asked for a little bit of time. And so Duncan probably, he's got 4 concurrent professorships. So he's in the law school, medical school, Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics. He teaches in the graduate school for mathematics, and then the School of Arts and Sciences as a medical historian. And he's probably one of the more published people that I know. I don't think a second-year medical student had ever gone through his door and sat down and said, "Hey, I read a book. Can you tell me about it?" Especially your book. And so he kind of looked at me, and he was one of these guys that that was a lot of years ago, more years than I want to tell you. And he's still a friend. And I was gonna, I was one night I was sitting down thinking about Duncan, and I was thinking about what did I learn from Duncan. And I've got this little piece of paper on my screen here that I'm reading from, and it's at the top of it. It says what I learned from Duncan, and there are 10 lessons here, which are kind of things I want to share with you today. And maybe it's a jumping off point for a conversation. So the first lesson is there is a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is somebody who says, "Hey, Edward, that's a great idea. Go do that." But a sponsor says, "Huh, that's pretty cool. Why don't we go do that together?" And a sponsor is a person who is willing to leave a little skin on the map for you, and he's willing to, or she's willing to help you through the troubles of life and kind of walk with you along the way. And then if you get into a jam, he or she's willing to stand up for you. And I I watched Duncan over the years not only be a mentor but be a sponsor for people, and he was very careful about who he chose to sponsor, and he sponsored some fantastic folks. Linda Hedrick is one of them. She's now the dean, or was the former dean of the School of Medicine in Missouri, in Columbia. Randy Siebel, who ran all epidemiology and biostatistics for Cleveland, and there are a number of other people that he sponsored, not just mentored along, but he would be very choosy about that. The second thing I learned from Duncan, who's a PhD, he's not a doctor, he's not a physician, he's a PhD, is the difference between what he called health services research and research that works. In the field, just like medicine, of health services research, there's a theory that things work and things don't. And Duncan was one of these guys who was really open-minded about stuff that seemed like on the fringes. And it reminds me of one of my professors in medicine when I did a medicine residency. Jim Carter used to say, and when I was talking to him about alternative medicine, he goes, "There's no such thing as alternative medicine." He said, "There's medicine that works and medicine that doesn't." And Duncan was like that. He actually discarded dogma and was curious enough about the first-hand knowledge of what works and what doesn't, to be innovative once he got curious about things. And so he didn't discard things out of principle. He actually was a man of first principles and understood how some things worked or didn't work. The third lesson I learned from Duncan is, and not specifically from Duncan, it's from his wife, Ellie. Now, Ellie is a force of nature in her own right. She is a pediatrician. She's an Olympic class sculler, and she's an Olympic class sailor. And so Ellie doesn't have to tolerate Duncan's own press releases. She can take those things with a grain of salt. And you'll hear sometimes at dinner, Duncan start to go on some tangent, and you'll hear Ellie go, "Oh, Duncan," and roll her eyes about what's going on. She believes in him, but she is a constant and steady companion, a keelboard to Duncan's sail and rudder, and one who is a great partner in life, and a trusted partner and a faithful partner over their career. And so I think the third lesson I learned from Duncan was the value of an equal spouse in life. The fourth lesson I learned from Duncan was his willingness to walk a mile with me in my shoes. I'm remembering one time we were in Stockholm, and he had invited me to do some work on a giant study he was doing with the Federation of County Councils in Stockholm and all the countries in Scandinavia, so Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Iceland, and Norway. And I remember having a dinner with him, and it got late in Stockholm, and the taxis and the public transport quit running, and we were probably 6 or 7 miles away from our hotel after the dinner at one of his friend's house was over, and we just decided to walk home. And we actually had one of the most pleasant walks that I've ever had, and that sort of set up a pattern, because this study was a big and long running study. We would go back to Stockholm, and we would actually choose nights to go on these walks and have these great conversations. And so he literally walked a mile with me and challenged me along the way and introduced me to some fantastic thinkers during those walks along the way. I think the fifth lesson I learned from Duncan is his ability as a sponsor to let me run between the guardrail and the ditch. Anytime I'd come with him with a crazy idea, he would not blanch at it. He wouldn't flinch at it. He'd let me go with that idea and then begin to get interested and take a perspective of that was always helpful and never judgmental. For example, when I decided to go work for the Hospital Corporation of America, a pretty aggressive for-profit company, which I'm not sure that his values were completely 100% aligned with, he thought that was a great idea for me and encouraged me to go. When I was wanting to go from the East Coast to Idaho, he thought that was a great idea and encouraged me to go. And so that was a wonderful, thoughtful thing that he did. The sixth thing that the sponsorship did with Duncan was that he brought me into a community as a peer, even though I wasn't a peer, anywhere near a peer. And he introduced me to many of his friends as a respected colleague. And because of that, those colleagues respected my opinion, whether it was worth two hoots and a holler or not. He did that, and over time I grew into that role. And I don't know if he saw something in me or just because I got lucky and he acted the way he did. As a sponsor, he pulled me into the world of his community and his peers. The seventh lesson is probably one of the better ones, is that sometimes you fall upward. Now, my career, probably like a lot of yours, has not always been an upward thing. And sometimes the lessons that you learn best are the lessons that are the hardest ones. And when you're having a rough spot in your journey, I had a good enough friendship with Duncan to tell him that. And what Duncan did as a sponsor is he related some of those rough spots in his journey to me as well. And I think in this time, especially for men, and I can't speak to the journey that women are on right now, but sometimes the real job of older men with younger men is to help them through that failure. And that failure sometimes burns the bright orange into a crimson that is a smarter shade of color for those guys. And it's a rough river to go down sometimes, but I think having gone there makes you a wiser, at least in my case, man, along the way. One of the things that I noticed that Duncan did along with falling upward with me was as ancient as the Odysseus story, the Odyssey. He gave me a gift, a blessing, and a warning along the way. And I think sponsors can give people a gift, a blessing, and a warning as you go down the pathway. And it's a valuable lesson. As at least from my perspective, a man fails and fails into a greater role and a greater wisdom. The eighth thing that Duncan did for me was give me the understanding that sometimes you don't know. And when you stand in unknowing, it feels like fear. And fear is a powerful motivator to get some change done. But one of the things that Duncan was able to do to me was help me understand that standing in fear is a signal to understand that you need to stand in unknowing, and then just be there and watch and learn from unknowing and wonder what that unknowing is telling you. And his way of talking about that is that there's known and knowable, which is kind of where the scientific method comes from. But then there's complex, chaotic, unknown, and unknowable. And if we are patient enough to stand in those places where there's complex, chaotic, unknown, and unknowable things going on, we can watch and make sense out of them and learn. And fear is sometimes a lesson to stand at unknowing and watch. And so that was a very, very valuable lesson for me, is to not be fearful, but to use fear as an indicator of not knowing. The ninth thing that he taught me is the value of durable friendships. Duncan is a man who's had 30, 40, 50-year friendships, and he maintains them. And I've just watched his network of friends and his ability to connect people. It's kind of like Jim, it reminds you a little bit of your and my friendship. We've bounced between the guardrail and ditch for 30 years, and we careen forward still. And it's an incredible gift to have long-standing friends, because you don't get new friends that are long old friends, and it's a worthy investment. Finally, one of the things I remember when I was getting finished with my medical school, I went and talked to him because I thought I wanted to go to one of the Harvard residencies. And he said to me something that I thought was really, really wise. He said, sometimes you don't want to go to Harvard, Edward. And he was a Harvard guy. He had gone to Harvard and got his doctorate there. And he said that, you know what? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, the folks at Harvard are very good at curating what's already been discovered and bringing it into the middle of the circle. He said, but where the real activities occur around the edges, they're the ecotones where two different ecosystems come together. And those are the places that are really creative, really creative. And I thought about it for a little while, and he's right. I mean, he was a really wonderful person who lived at the edges and was able to do more at the edges than he would have been able to do in the center. And it gave me some good advice. I think probably, I don't think I would have done very well at Harvard. I think I would have done a lot better in Boise, Idaho, at the edges of some of these things. So if you want to be like Duncan, sponsor young talent, look at primary source documents and make your own judgment about them. Walk a mile with someone you know. Be okay standing in unknown and being fearful. Marry someone you're equal or better and honor that relationship. Get to know the guardrail and ditch in your life. Live into your community. Learn to embrace walking in darkness sometimes and build it where you are. That's what I learned from them.